A routine traffic stop. A badge of authority ignored. One phone call to the Pentagon. And the racist cop who messed with the wrong woman is about to learn what real power looks like. He thought he had the power, until she made one call. The night was quiet on the suburban street. The only sound the hum of Colonel Ava Carter's sleek black SUV as it rolled to a stop at a red light. Ava, a poised and sharp-eyed black woman in her 40s, wore civilian clothes, but her military bearing was unmistakable. Her government plates should have signaled authority, but the flashing lights of the police cruiser behind her told a different story. The officer, a white man in his mid-30s with a smug demeanor, approached her window. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," Officer Bradley ordered, his tone clipped. "License and registration." Ava frowned but complied, handing over her military ID along with her driver's license. "Officer, is there a problem?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Bradley barely glanced at the ID before scoffing. "Yeah, the problem is you blowing through that stop sign back there." His eyes narrowed as he stepped back. "Now, hands on the hood." Ava's jaw tightened. She knew this routine, had seen it play out too many times. But she also knew the weight of her rank. Still, for now, she obeyed, placing her hands on the vehicle as Bradley began patting her down with unnecessary roughness. The humid night air clung to Ava's skin as she stood with her palms pressed against the cool metal of her SUV's hood. The street was eerily quiet now, the only sounds being the static crackle of Officer Bradley's radio and the distant hum of highway traffic. His hands moved with unnecessary roughness during the pat-down, fingers digging into the seams of her blazer with deliberate pressure. "Spread your legs," Bradley commanded, his voice carrying that particular brand of authority that came from knowing no one would question him. Ava complied, but her posture remained rigid, not the slumped submission he was accustomed to seeing from detainees. When his hand brushed too high along her inner thigh, she stiffened. "That's enough," Ava said, her voice low but carrying the unmistakable tone of someone used to being obeyed. "You've established I'm unarmed." Bradley stepped back with a smirk, his flashlight beam dancing across her government plates. "You military folks always think you're above the law." He tapped the plates with his nightstick. "These don't mean shit to me." Ava turned slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I wasn't aware stop sign violations required this level of scrutiny, officer." The flashlight beam hit her square in the eyes, forcing her to blink against the sudden glare. Bradley's silhouette loomed large as he stepped closer, invading her personal space. "I decide what requires scrutiny around here," he said, his breath smelling of stale coffee and wintergreen gum. "Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." Ava's pulse jumped, but her voice remained steady. "On what charge?" "Resisting." Bradley's hand went to his cuffs. "And I can add contempt of cop if you'd like to keep talking." The metallic snick of the handcuffs being unclipped from his belt seemed unnaturally loud. Ava's military training kicked in. Assess, adapt, overcome. She could take him down in 3 moves if necessary, but the body cam on his chest changed the calculus. Instead, she extended her wrists in front of her body, a supple power move that forced him to either cuff her awkwardly or acknowledge her cooperation. Bradley wasn't having it. He grabbed her right wrist and twisted it behind her back with enough force to make her shoulder joint protest. "I said behind your back," he growled, his fingers digging into her pulse point. Pain flared up Ava's arm, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. As the cold metal closed around her left wrist, she turned her head just enough to make eye contact. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice dropping into the calm, measured tone she used when briefing generals about combat losses. "That ID in your hand says I'm a colonel in the United States Army." Bradley actually chuckled as he finished securing the cuffs, giving them an unnecessary extra kick tighter than necessary. "Yeah, and I'm the president," he said, tossing her military ID onto the hood of her car where it skittered across the glossy black paint. You people always got some excuse. The casual racism hung in the air like gunpowder after a shot. Ava inhaled sharply through her nose, the scent of hot pavement and exhaust suddenly overwhelming. She could feel the weight of her phone in her back pocket, so close yet impossibly far with her hands restrained behind her. Bradley's grip on her elbow was unnecessarily tight as he guided her toward his cruiser. The reality of the situation settled over Ava like a Kevlar vest. The bodycam footage that would mysteriously malfunction, the paperwork that would get lost, the word of a decorated officer against a patrol cop in a suburban precinct where the thin blue line stretched taut. As the cruiser's rear door opened with a creak, Ava planted her feet. "I need my phone called," she said, putting just enough command in her voice to make it clear this wasn't a request. Bradley smirked, his hand hovering near the small of her back in a not-so-subtle threat. "You'll get your call when I say you get your call." The plastic seat was still warm from the last detainee as Ava was guided into the back seat. The door slammed with finality, trapping her in the claustrophobic space that smelled of sweat and antiseptic. Through the cage partition, she watched Bradley saunter back to her SUV, his flashlight poking through the windows in a performative search. Ava tested the cuffs, standard issue Smith & Wesson M100s. With enough time and the right angle, she could probably pick them with a hairpin. But escape wasn't the objective. Survival was, and right now, survival meant playing the long game. The engine roared to life, and as the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Ava caught a glimpse of her military ID still lying abandoned on the hood of her SUV. The gold eagle glinted mockingly in the flashing blue lights, a symbol of authority that meant nothing in this context. Bradley's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. "Comfortable back there, Colonel?" he asked, putting extra emphasis on her rank like it was a joke. Ava held his gaze without blinking. "Perfectly, officer," she lied smoothly. "I'll be sure to mention your professionalism in my report to the Pentagon." The cruiser hit a pothole hard enough to make her teeth rattle, but Ava refused to look away first. This was a different kind of battlefield, but the rules of engagement were the same: maintain the high ground, control the narrative, and never let the enemy see you sweat. As the precinct lights came into view, Ava began mentally preparing her next moves. The arrest was inevitable now, but the war was just beginning, and Colonel Ava Carter hadn't lost a battle yet. The interrogation room was a cold, sterile box, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the scent of stale coffee and industrial cleaner clinging to the air. Colonel Ava Carter sat perfectly upright in the metal chair, her wrists still bound by the cuffs, the steel biting into her skin. The room's surveillance camera blinked lazily in the corner, its red light a silent witness to the unfolding injustice. Across from her, Officer Bradley lounged against the wall, arms crossed, his smirk unwavering. He had dealt with uppity civilians before, doctors, lawyers, even a city councilman once, and none of their titles had saved them from a night in holding. Why should this woman be any different? Ava's face was a mask of calm, but beneath it, her mind raced. She had been trained for hostage scenarios, enemy interrogations, even psychological warfare. But never had she imagined she'd need those skills on American soil, in a precinct 20 minutes from her own home. The irony was bitter. She had served 3 tours overseas, earned a chest full of medals, commanded battalions, only to be reduced to, "you people," in the eyes of a man who had never left his county. Bradley tossed a cheap plastic phone onto the table between them. "One call," he said, as if granting her a favor. "Make it quick." Ava didn't react to his condescension. Instead, she reached for the phone with deliberate slowness, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline humming through her veins. She knew the number by heart, not just the Pentagon's main line, but the direct extension to the Joint Chiefs Liaison Office, a number reserved for emergencies. The kind of emergency, she thought darkly, where a decorated officer was being treated like a common criminal for the crime of driving while black. The line connected after half a ring. A crisp, professional voice answered. Defense Command, Sergeant Haskins speaking. Ava didn't waste a syllable. This is Colonel Ava Carter. Badge number 78,245. I need immediate verification of my status and location to the local PD. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet, the same tone she'd used to brief generals, to command respect in rooms full of men who'd once doubted her. A pause. Then, the sergeant's voice sharpened. Stand by, Colonel. Bradley rolled his eyes. Cute act. You really think pretending? Ava cut him off with a single raised finger, her gaze never leaving his. Patch me through to General Reynolds at the Pentagon. Now. Something in her tone made Bradley's smirk flicker. Half a continent away, in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, the call triggered a protocol rarely used outside of active combat zones. Sergeant Haskins' fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up Ava's service record, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Colonel Ava Carter wasn't just any officer. She was Deputy Director of Strategic Operations, a woman who reported directly to the Secretary of Defense on matters of national security. Her file was flagged with a Tier 1 clearance warning. Immediate response required. Haskins didn't hesitate. He transferred the call to General Daniel Reynolds, a 4-star with a reputation for being a human hurricane when his people were threatened. Reynolds answered on the first ring. Carter, report. Ava's voice was clipped. Sir, I've been unlawfully detained by local PD. Charges are fabricated, requesting immediate intervention. Silence. Then, location. When Ava relayed the precinct's details, Reynolds' exhale was audible. Sit tight, Colonel. You'll hear fireworks in 60 seconds. Back in the interrogation room, Bradley's bravado was crumbling. The longer Ava held the phone, the more the air thickened with unease. Then, the precinct's landline rang. Ava didn't smile. She didn't need to. The desk sergeant, a weary 50-something with no patience for Bradley's antics, picked up. His face drained of color as the voice on the line identified itself as the Pentagon's Office of General Counsel. You have a United States Army colonel in custody, the voice said, lithely calm. Release her, now, or your department will be facing federal obstruction charges by sunrise. The surgeon stammered. There must be a mistake. The mistake, the voice interrupted, was your officer ignoring a military ID. The next call will be from the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Your choice. The phone clattered back into its cradle. Bradley was still sputtering when the precinct commander burst into the room, his face flushed with panic. Uncuff her, he barked. The cuffs clicked open. Ava stood slowly, rolling her shoulders, her gaze never leaving Bradley's. You're lucky, she said softly, that I'm not the kind of woman who destroys lives for fun. Then she walked out, past the stunned officers, past the murmuring clerks, into the night where the weight of her uniform still meant something. And Bradley? He was left standing there, his career crumbling before his eyes, realizing too late that he'd picked a fight with the wrong woman. The precinct's fluorescent lights hummed like a swarm of wasps, their harsh glow reflecting off the scuffed linoleum floors as Colonel Ava Carter rose from the interrogation chair. The click of the handcuffs releasing was deafening in the sudden quiet. She didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate, rolling her stiff shoulders, flexing her fingers to restore circulation. Each motion a silent rebuke to the men who had underestimated her. Officer Bradley stood frozen, his earlier bravado replaced by the dawning horror of realization. His throat worked soundlessly, his mind scrambling to process how quickly the tables had turned. The precinct commander, a barrel-chested man with a thinning hairline and a face now slick with sweat, hovered near the door, his posture rigid with barely contained panic. Ava picked up her military ID from where Bradley had tossed it onto the table. She brushed off an invisible speck of dust before sliding it back into her wallet. The gesture was small but loaded. A reclamation of respect. "Ma'am," the commander began, his voice cracking. Ava held up a hand. "Say it." The room seemed to shrink under the weight of her presence. Ava moved toward the door, the stride unhurried, her posture perfect, back straight, chin level, the way she'd marched in 100 military parades. The precinct's bullpen had gone eerily quiet. Detectives paused mid-sip of their coffee. Dispatchers stopped typing. Even the drunk in holding cell number 3 shut his mouth. Every eye tracked her progress. Bradley, desperate to salvage some shred of dignity, lurched after her. "You can't just..." Ava didn't turn around. "Watch me." The commander grabbed Bradley's arm, hissing, "Shut your damn mouth, unless you want to be walking a beat in Alaska tomorrow." The younger officer paled. For the first time, he truly understood. This wasn't just about a traffic stop. This was about power, and he had just lost. Outside the interrogation room, the precinct commander scrambled to contain the fallout. "Colonel Carter, please." He trailed after her like a chastised child. "Let me apologize on behalf of the department. This was a misunderstanding." Ava stopped walking. Turned. Fixed him with a look that had made hardened Marines break into a cold sweat. "A misunderstanding," she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Is that what we're calling it?" The commander flinched. Ava stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Your officer ignored my rank, disregarded my credentials, assumed, because of my skin, that I was lying. Tell me, Commander, if I'd been a white man in this uniform, would this have been a misunderstanding too?" The commander had no answer. Ava didn't wait for one. "I won't be pressing charges," she said, loud enough for the eavesdropping cops to hear. A beat. "But the Pentagon will be conducting a full review of this department's conduct. And I'll be watching." The unspoken threat hung in the air. "Your careers are now on borrowed time." Back in the bullpen, the whispers started before Ava had even cleared the building. "That's Colonel Carter. She's on the Joint Chiefs shortlist for promotion." Bradley fucked up. Big time. They're gonna crucify this precinct. Bradley stood in the center of it all, his face ashen. His fellow officers, men who'd laughed at his jokes, who'd turned a blind eye to his methods, now avoided his gaze. The blue wall of silence had cracks, and self-preservation was a hell of a motivator. The commander stormed past, smiling, "My office. Now." What followed was a dressing down so brutal, the entire precinct heard it through the thin walls. "You arrogant, stupid son of a..." The commander's voice shook with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The Pentagon is already drafting a formal complaint. The mayor's office is calling. The damn news is sniffing around." Bradley, for once, had nothing smart to say. "You're suspended, pending review. And if I have anything to say about it, you'll be lucky to get a job directing traffic at a damn Walmart." The door slammed. Outside, the first reporters were already pulling into the parking lot. Ava sat in her SUV, hands steady on the wheel, breathing in the quiet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion, and something darker. This wasn't justice. Not really. Bradley would likely keep his pension. The system would protect its own. But then her phone buzzed. A text from General Reynolds. "Report filed. FBI Civil Rights Division opening an inquiry. Your call, Colonel. Want us to bury them." Ava stared at the message. Thought about the countless others who didn't have a general on speed dial. The black and brown kids who'd been taught to keep their hands visible, to say sir, to swallow their pride just to survive a traffic stop. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. Then she typed. "No. Burn it all down." She started the engine. Somewhere behind her, the precinct's lights burned bright, a beacon of false security, soon to be extinguished. And Ava, she drove away, her head high, her soul heavier than ever.